how future land uses need to align. The county has fewer land use classifications than the city does, but in terms of how those line up and where we would like to see areas for change and for growth focus versus areas we would like to protect, there's generally a pretty good alignment in there in terms of setting the table for development in the future. So that's an important finding going forward. Next slide. And also, just for anybody not familiar with it, the way that the street network is set up in the site, aside from the interstates in the darker color there that you see along the periphery, the tones of blue through the middle are our big roads. And I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that the green roads that we're seeing, those are for our local trips, and almost all of those start and finish on a big road somewhere. The connections between the two are pretty lacking. And so what we saw is in this is, we're looking at a site where our study area where almost 90% of the trips consistently are by vehicle and starting and stopping throughout the region. So we're looking for ways to help improve not necessarily mobility through the study area. We've kind of got that on lockdown. It's how do we start to serve those trips that are within that study area so they don't always have to use that same larger regional network. Next slide. And just a couple of images to go with the maps to understand the character of the development pattern within the study area. You have kind of the low density, low commercial along the major corridors that you see on the right. But as you move away from those, you have development along River Drive that is more neighborhood, commercial scale. You have detached single-family residential. You have tucked away in the study area some of those gated apartment communities that present kind of a layer between the interior of the study area and those connections down to the river. Then you have campuses and office parks in that as well. So there's a lot happening within there that we need to think about in terms of how we weave in a new way of moving around the study area into the existing development pattern. Next slide. And then obviously coming back to then how do we think about the rivers and the natural assets within the site, and that really was a big theme that came up in community engagement. We thought about it going into it. We knew that was going to be important, but for folks that live in the study area, knowing that there's some great things in terms of the Saluda River Walk and the trail along the Broad River that are outside of or on the edge of the study area, having a version of that's within the peninsula, having access to that doesn't exist today. Is there an opportunity to connect with that and really make it feel like more a part of the study area where folks live and work? Next slide. So again, some shots from the charrette at our home base in Dutch Square Mall. Great week there. Next slide. The big part of that was helping us to define a vision for this, which was kind of like what I said at the very beginning of really thinking about this as a place and space for residents and visitors before we just start thinking about mobility projects or new land uses. Like, what does all of this want to be when it grows up? What do we want the experience in the place to feel like? And then we can make those decisions about safe and accessible transportation or maybe land uses in different places to complement that. And the biggest thing is just, there are the rivers, but there are also other areas within the site that are some of its best natural features. There aren't a lot of parks or green spaces in there that these could provide that start to help us think about how do we stitch these things together and provide that local system of mobility. Next slide. These are the goals that we've got documented in the plan and kind of reinforce the project's vision. And I think the biggest one out of all of these is really thinking about, again, how do we celebrate the area's natural beauty, but doing that in a way that helps us develop that local system of multimodal mobility in goal number 4. Next slide. So our approach to this plan, again, thinking that it's going to be very long-term and we need to be flexible to accommodate change and changes in market cycles over time, but also in a way that gets the outcomes in terms of local mobility that we would like to see. We've built this on 4 different layers. The first is the river access layer. It's thinking about those public space, green space opportunities that are latent within the site, and I'll talk more about those in the middle. And by virtue of linking those together and also to the rivers, that really is kind of our guiding method for thinking about this non-vehicular local mobility system that allows folks to move more easily within the study area and access some of these natural features that add to the place. The other one is street connections, and this is about building out those green roads, those local connections. There are a couple different types in there that can really help with the mobility within the site. Growth strategy, making sure we have the right land uses in the right places and really articulating where we want that growth to go in a way that supports it. And then looking for those big sites like Dutch Square Mall that have that opportunity to really turn the tides in development in big chunks when those are ready to happen. But those are always kind of a tough variable to pin down. So maybe not putting all of our chips necessarily in that pile to make sure something on this plan can happen in the meantime. Next slide. So the resulting plan, all kind of captured in one image, highlights all of those public space opportunities. The blue icons show different types of those. The bright green lines show different greenway types that connect all of those together with the rivers and the major corridors. You'll see in the orange the different street connections that can help provide kind of interior neighborhood to neighborhood connectivity, as well as organize some of those bigger sites, again, like Dutch Square Mall, as well as noting other planned projects outside of the study area that these need to anticipate connections to. And I'll go a little bit more into each of those layers on the next slide. So the river access layer, this details out those different park and green space opportunities internal to the site. I won't go through each of these, but just to give you a flavor of them, some of the most important are riverfront access on the sites where the grades work out. At the end of Omarest Drive, there's actually one already there if you know how to look for it. It's kind of formalizing those as well as other opportunities. Throughout the site, through a number of developments, you have latent stormwater ponds that we've seen in a number of cities where those can be turned into green space assets for communities. We've got a lot of utility easements that are great for trail corridors and view corridors on the site. Recreational facilities at schools, there's a nationwide trend into turning those into productive recreational uses for users others than the school after hours. And even acknowledging that the assets like the Riverbank Zoo, which is a regional and national draw, also is a local destination for study area residents that are looking for access to the river and the Saluda Trail. So how does that play a better everyday role within this system? That's coupled with the next slide that gets us into the different types of greenways that run the hierarchy from naturalized greenways, which are those side paths in their own right of ways, all the way down to wider sidewalks depending on the facilities, but understanding that these all add up in the different ways of creating this network. And I will say that we've worked with the City of Columbia and looked at their engineering standards to make sure our proposed minimum widths and what we're terming these things all line up with existing standards, as well as are capturing some of these that have already appeared in existing plans and pulling them into this one as well. Next slide. Street connections, we're putting more onto the greenway, non-vehicular side, but understanding that this is still a vehicle study area too. One is neighborhood links. So when we have neighborhoods that are close together and almost you can make it from one to the next, except for that one tiny link that didn't get built, whether it was an existing right of way or a vacant property. We've identified a number of those that it's a small connection, but it can go a long way into making the study area more accessible for local residents overall. And then more largely for opportunity sites like Dutch Square Mall or bigger parcels on Greystone Boulevard, when those do redevelop, those are an opportunity to include new streets in the design of those sites and developments that connect large swaths of the study area to each other, whether it's neighborhoods to neighborhoods or neighborhoods to rivers. So we've shown a number of those, as well as different options that those could be reconfigured, knowing that there's some flexibility as development plans for these sites get figured out. Next slide. The growth strategy in two parts, growth and conservation. growth where we would like to see new development happen and it could absorb a greater level of density. Those are primarily along our major corridors and the conservation areas where we have our natural assets and some of our lower density development, and especially along the rivers, noting that that's where we kind of like to see things change. We may observe some growth in those areas, but it will be more in matching the form of existing development within there. Next slide. And the lines for those really align with the City of Columbia and Richland County's land use classifications. Now, there really aren't any land use changes that we saw as a result of this. For us, it was just a helpful way of articulating how these areas are organized relative to the sites, so that you can kind of understand these groupings and classifications. Next slide. The opportunity sites, I talked a little bit about these before. Dutch Square Mall, Greystone Boulevard, we broke that into two pieces. Earlwood Hub, these are all sites that we think are prime candidates for redevelopment at some point in big swaths. If there's one major departure of this plan from, say, the Broad River Road, some of those plans identified like Dutch Square Mall and Broad River Road as big major catalytic projects that can bring great changes to the area. We agree with that. The problem with, I think, previous plans was that we put our eggs in that basket. We said those things had to happen first before anything else will really change and follow that. For us, we're saying we've broken this into smaller pieces that can proceed ahead of these, and when they're ready to happen, they can add great value to the study area in their plan, but we're not hinging everything else happening on these going first. Next slide. Which gets us into our implementation strategy of how we break this into smaller projects, much more manageable. Our idea here is things that the city or the county may already be working on, show what those add up to, and use that to build momentum, that when you make a lot of small splashes, they can add up quickly into big changes for the study area. We did look at transit as part of this. We feel like right now at the site to really get into recommend operational changes is kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but acknowledging that as this place grows and is more successful and some of this network that we're proposing gets built out, revisiting transit service down the line is absolutely something important to keep in mind. And then making decisions about bigger projects, be opportunistic. When those are ready to go, make sure that they align with the different ways that we've shown that they can be compatible with the plan. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
All right, so I totally agree that you've got to look at smaller projects, because if you put it all together, it feels like a really big boulder. So if you're looking at smaller projects, even the smaller projects seem kind of large in this particular area. So how would you figure out which of the smaller projects, where would you focus, and how would you then try to connect those projects together?
Good question. The first projects that we think are the most important, and I will say there's a very, very long project list that starts to put priorities with all of these. It's not in the presentation, but it's in the document. The ones that we think are the most important are ones that have been previously identified in other plans. Those align with making really big connections within this study area, both getting to it and around it. So the idea is now seeing how those really could serve as a backbone for better connectivity within the area. So we flagged those as like, keep going on those. Many of those already have momentum. We were even hoping River Drive, a first pass at that, might have been finished so that we could show that condition in the plan, and are still hopeful about that. The next one is there's kind of a second tier set of building off of those, bridging in the focus areas of trying to get from major corridors to those connections and then down to the river. And then the last ones are the overhauling of major roadways, the major corridors in the site.
So how many of those would you do at one time? Or how many of those?
How much money do you have? I don't, that's a good question. I would have
Also
to
a
kind
good
of
question.
give that one some more thought.
Okay, but I think that's important that you said that, because I think that's part of the overwhelming nature of the project. Is that even I guess that's what I was trying to get at. Even the smaller parts of the project will be expensive. So I guess.
That's understandable. Oh, sorry.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, so you have to be very strategic in where you deploy your money so that you get the most out of it as possible, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
That's absolutely right. And as we were drawing this, I'll kind of reference back to the beginning of it being a 4.5 square mile site. To us, like, I don't know, in my long career at this point, it's been one of the bigger areas. And you know, you're not going to take a whole, let's say, quadrant of this and do it overnight. It's going to be a very long-term take bites of these. But we feel like the projects that have been previously identified, like, those can add up to something and can give you that momentum. And then I think there's even opportunities as you go. There are so many big sites, and I know I keep going back to Dutch Square Mall, but there are others, those auto properties, we know time and again those move. A lot of those can be built within those development projects themselves, so that's why we've tried to show different ways that those projects can be accommodated within there. But it's going to be a very long-term incremental project.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's see. And I guess on that note, just clarifying the final report outline, it's been very similar to how I've presented it here. The front end of the report goes into a lot more detail in terms of the major findings of the study area that are serving as the basis for our recommendations. We go a lot more into what we heard during the engagement process and how that informed the decision making. The plan goes into details of many of those projects, including some very, very high level concepts for how even the most major roadways could be adapted to fit in with this framework, different ways of approaching those opportunity sites to make sure that no matter what way that the development is being thought about, there's different ways for them to provide a network that's compatible with what we're outlining in this vision. And then the implementation strategy, along with the very long project list with priority and cost ranges, are provided at the back end of that. Next slide. So just summarizing, here obviously the rivers were exciting, and there's lots of great opportunities for public space, but those aren't just natural assets on their own. They're the major organizing element for local mobility and access to those sites. Focus on small things to make big changes and build momentum. What's exciting is the land use here seems to already be supportive of the type of growth and where we'd like to see it. Where we've built in flexibility to show how multiple alternatives can support the same planning outcomes. We know that city and county coordination, because of this being half in city, half county, will be crucial, but also keep working with community members in the ongoing process. And this is a long-term vision. I kind of got beat to the punch there, but it's again, it took decades to get to the site as a study area as it is today, and we're I think bold enough to say that that's most likely the timeline you're looking at for these, but that's okay. And next slide, I think that's the last one. So if there are any other questions or comments, I'm happy to take those now.
Yeah, can you drill down a little bit more on like the recommendations, give some tangible examples? Like, one of them was focus on the small things, your big momentum. So what is an example of that you would suggest for our specific?
Yeah, do you mind scrolling back to maybe the big, or I've got it on my side too. I think it's slide number 15. I don't know how big it is on your side. So I would say, when you look internal to some of these different quadrants, and I know that's on a different one, we've always thought about within these, there's kind of one core piece of the network that hasn't really shown up on a plan yet, but really provides an internal connectivity. So, for example, if you're looking at the Elm Abode area in the north eastern section of the site, there's a green line that starts at the intersection of Broad River Road and Greystone Boulevard that kind of weaves its way through the neighborhood. There's a big green rectangle in the middle. There are connections there that you can build out piece by piece that as you start to finish that out really becomes, again, that backbone by which connecting to the river, connecting back to the boulevard, really, or back to the major corridors, help you kind of complete that internal connectivity. But it's those kind of first pieces in there that help get those started.
So without putting words in your mouth, you're saying we have to start with some type of infrastructure piece.
Yes.
Got it. Will?
I'm good, thanks.
Odyssey.
This is helpful.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you all.
This is the second time Will and I've seen this. It's on the cog.
Yeah.
Jeff, have you ever seen this before?
No, I've not.
You ever seen this before? What's your thinking?
Great plan, it's, how do you fund it, and how do you get started? I think we're all thinking a lot of the same things.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a really big boulder to move. And, I mean, you'd have to come up with some type of ROI study, wouldn't you? I mean,
Well, I think we have a problem with donut holes in general. I mean, this is a waffle fry.
yeah, no, I know, I mean, this
I
is,
mean, until you start working in coordination with the county and the communities, do we know how organized the neighborhood associations are out there? I mean, does anybody on community development? That would probably be one thing, is start organizing the neighborhoods.
what's interesting, they had the charrette, so
Yeah.
I guess maybe it would make sense to get to kind of go through that detailed information about what the people said.
Pockets of older,
I know,
seasoned communities out there.
it's really interesting, I mean, there's gotta be a really good story of how that area it feels very, in my lifetime, very random how those kind of areas developed and kind of either congealed together or didn't congeal together. It seems like there's a whole bunch of different,
Isn't that back when you were a young professional and St. Andrews was the place to be?
shoot, who didn't, we used to go to Dutch Square. That was the place to go. To go out there on Sunday and get an orange Julius, remember that?
And we did, I mean, you and I,
First Chick-fil-A was in that.
I think it was too, yeah.
yeah, and we talked, Greystone Boulevard would be a good catalyst project.
I think that might be the case. That's what I was saying, it's just, I get it, look, yeah, and if money and time was no problem, then we'll be great. But unfortunately, they're both,
Well, location of downtown, affordability for houses, that definitely has all the makings.
it's got you're right, it's got the makings of, being an amazing quality of life project, but, how much does quality of life really cost? So, anyway, it seems, I'm glad we're doing it, but I don't know exactly, I guess we'll bring this up at the next COG meeting, because they're gonna have to be the driver of this, right? Don't you think?
Well, I think you get the plan done, it's whether you shelf the plan or actually follow through on the plan, yeah.
So, we can put it right next to the east-west, what's it called, east-west,
East Central.
East Central, yeah.
Any plans?
Okay. Is there, does anybody think there's a next step on this, or is this just information?
Well, our
only?
chairman
Does this,
can
was this a public
posted.
hearing, technically?
So this was as information. So our next move would be, the request is that we adopt it as an area plan. We've done this with a number of area plans over the year. Yes, so many plans, but the things that we do with those area plans, I think, are maybe what I should highlight as part of the process is that we utilize those area plans to provide the Planning Commission, other boards and commissions with feedback on what the public planning process has recommended. So what that vision is. So when you review a rezoning, for example, if we adopt this plan, or if you all adopt this plan, then it becomes policy, and we would be able to provide you, the specific recommendations tied to a rezoning that you review, or a site plan that folks review at the Planning Commission. And a lot of the recommendations are for DOT streets. So the other thing that we can do with those adopted area plans is that we can provide feedback to DOT as they move forward with projects. So Kevin mentioned River Drive, and we all kind of giggled because they actually started painting the River Drive buffer bike lanes this weekend. We discovered that on our planning month ride on Sunday mornings. So those have started to go in. They're not officially in yet, but that is the type of kind of that conversation that an adopted plan allows us to have with DOT, who would be, a lot of those on-street facilities they would be responsible for. So
So let me ask you this, because sometimes residents point back to a plan that was done 10, 15 years ago. Is the zoning that is being recommended going to come as a shock to the neighborhoods for density's sake? Or is it going to stay consistent where single-family homes are, single-family homes will stay? But as you get more towards that commercial corridor, that's where the density comes into play.
So there are no zoning recommendations as part of this plan specifically. What I think Kevin talked a little bit about was that the recommendations are more a way for folks to utilize our existing future land use, which is part of the comprehensive plan, both that the city and Richland County have. And those were adopted kind of together when we were both going through those processes at the same time, and to distill them down into basically two kind of broad categories, that growth and conservation category. So it shouldn't be a surprise. These are land uses that, or future land uses that, again, aren't regulatory, but have been kind of affixed, if you will, to the map since 2015 with Plan Columbia, and I think 2014 with Richland County's comprehensive plan. So it's either 14 or 16. They were a year off one way or the other. But those were developed together. And so it wouldn't represent changes for folks there. We have been using the Broad River Corridor Master Plan in our recommendations, our staff recommendations to y'all and city reports for rezonings and that sort of thing. One of the things that I think we appreciate about this plan versus the Broad River Corridor plan is that the Broad River Corridor plan, as Kevin mentioned, is very specific. So you'll look at a vacant piece of property and they've identified it as a, trying to think, there's one that we looked at recently with an annexation, and it was identified to be a community farmers market hub. And maybe that was a part of the vision that was discussed at the time in 2010 when that plan was adopted, but it was also a recommendation for very private property that maybe hadn't seen. So the recommendations of that plan are a little bit harder to distill out for y'all than something like a growth or a conservation strategy, if that makes sense.
But it would make those, there would obviously have to be zoning changes as a part of the plan, right?
No, so this, it's really looking at the interface between land use and transportation. So because it's a COG plan, it's really focused on that transportation, but it's looking at how that transportation can drive land use changes or play off the desired land use for an area. So it's really not recommending zoning changes. Certainly we have, a fairly recent UDO, and it makes recommendations for form and design for certain scales of projects that would be, best practices and would also align with the types of best practices, thinking about buildings treating the street in relationship to if you're putting in a lot of new street infrastructure that's pedestrian heavy and has the, like those would come together, but there are no changes that this plan would require of the city with our codes. What it really would do would help give us guidance if, in those conversations about transportation or connectivity or parks connectivity, where we can take on those opportunities.
I would like to see us work into the DOT stack the Greystone Boulevard project to is that River Drive from 126, kind of the car mile there. for-
And River Drive is, they've got the buffer bike lanes going in.
Yeah.
And then the Greystone cross section, he did add them to his PowerPoint in case you guys wanted to look at them in more detail. But that would probably be something that, because it's going back to the COG on the 24th, so the two of you will get to see it again in 2 days.
I love a good rerun. I was
But
gonna tell Kevin he was great in Footloose too.
but he didn't make his joke about being named Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
But he when it comes back, I think that's something that one of the reasons that it goes to the COG and that it's a COG sponsored plan is their goal is to add it to the long range transportation plan, which then allows it to be accessible for federal funding and those larger projects that they would take on. So.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
So there's no, help me pay for it.
so let's move on to the next report. Shaw's Circle Southeast Innovation. Great. Hey guys, how's it going? Good to see y'all again. How's life been? How long has it been?
It's been going well.
When was the last time, when did we see y'all last?
We talked. I don't think it's
Gosh.
Yeah, please.
July maybe.
3 months ago?
June, July.
Do you all have,
Yeah, why don't you pass out some
yeah,
copies?
I wasn't sure if you all had this in your booklets.
I think we do.
only got 15. Felt that way.
I just, I'm struggling with the binder, so I just figure it out. Yeah, it's, all right, perfect.
Cool.
Well, good.
All right, I'm gonna send this around the side just because it seems fun. You should leave it at that. Leave that now, I'll pick it up again. Thank
You guys drive around in the van or something?
We got a big bus. We kitted it out. No, we took my car. That was pretty cramped, but we made it work.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, a lot of Greyhounds and trains as well.
Yeah.
But
Sounds like a good HBO series.
yeah.
All right, let's go. Do they have to go to the mic?
No, we have this.
Okay, good. All right, perfect. All right, let's go.
Cool. Well, for everyone, my name is Jordan Fowler. I'm CEO of Shaw Circle, and this is Carter Burns and Ryan Henry. These are two of my partners. We recently graduated from the Moore School, and just because I'm seeing a lot of new faces, just to give you guys a little bit of background about who we are. So essentially what happened is a few years ago, Carter and I were accepted into the Carolina Finance Scholars Program at USC, and while 95% of the people in that program go off to Wall Street to work in investment banking, we decided to head out on our own. So we started a small family friends hedge fund, and we managed a strategy together for a couple of year. We had a lot of success doing that, but around that same time, we were developing some technology that really was, while it was exciting, it took a really long time to run. And the problem with that was, is that we couldn't turn our strategy from manually placing orders to systematic. But fortunately, we got a call one day from a professor, and he said, "Hey, are you guys interested in quantum computing?" And we honestly were like, "What the heck is that?" It's a buzzword, right? And at the time, this is when AI is taking off as well, so no one's really focusing on quantum. But we got a call, and we started to do a little bit of digging, and he said, "You have 24 hours to submit a proposal to figure out how to apply quantum computing to our hedge fund strategy." And we jumped on the opportunity and became the first recipients of South Carolina's largest technology grant through SC Quantum. And that grant took us to MIT on a week's notice to compete at their quantum hackathon, it's the largest quantum hackathon in the world. And so we competed alongside of a whole bunch of Harvard PhDs, MIT PhDs, and a lot of people from around the world in quantum industry. And we worked on a prompt from Moody's Analytics, and we tied for third with just a week's notice. And when we got back from that, we met with the Honorable Mayor Rickenman, and he had the insight to say, "Hey, this is really cool. What we're
Sounds just like Daniel.
This is cool.
yeah, I probably said it just like that. But we told him the story where we
He's gonna come busting through here.
but we told him a story where we were like, wow, when we were up there, a lot of the people had a lot more experience in quantum, and they were working in a lot of innovation labs and on quantum hardware. But when we came up with the South Carolina and Columbia energy that we had, and we were really focused on applying it to real world problems, a lot of them asked us, could we come and work for you? Could we move to South Carolina from the Boston area and come work with you guys on what you're building? And so when we told the mayor that, he said, that's fantastic, obviously. How do we do more of that? And we said, well, honestly, we just need to go talk to more people. And so.
Did they talk really slow to you right there, up there?
At first.
Yeah. No, no, it went well. But anyway, so we spent a month or two planning a roadshow, and we came and presented, and it looked like people liked it, I suppose, because it got approved. And we come back a few months later, I guess. Maybe it's been a little more than that. But
Told you he was coming in.
Oh, hey.
How's it going?
Told you he was coming.
We're talking about you. All good things.
You got this room bugged, Daniel?
But we completed the roadshow where we went around the entire Southeast with the goal of talking with academic institutions, entrepreneurship incubators, other quantum institutions to figure out how to collaborate and partner with Columbia and South Carolina being sort of the home of a lot of this technology. And what we'll get into with, and you guys will jump in here in a second, but what we found was that while there are a lot of cities with robust ecosystems, Columbia has all of the pieces it needs, not just to be successful in quantum, but really in a broader entrepreneurship and any innovation niche that it decides to target. And so I think what we'll probably get into is just talking a little bit about what we found on this roadshow with the cities and what seems to be working for them, and then what can Columbia do based off what we learned in our own experiences launching this company over the last 4 years? And yeah, we can go from there, and hopefully it's a conversation after that. So
Yeah,
So is this a learning experience, or is this more of a promoting Columbia?
so
as
it was,
well.
yeah, I can touch on that. It was certainly both. I would separate it into the short-term impact, which I would say is was the learning and promotion, and then the long-term impact is, implementing what we went and learned. In terms of the promotion of Columbia, though, on page 10, we make mention of it, but we really did leverage our company and then personal social media brands to go and then, get some impressions out there. We ended up hitting on our company page 19,000 impressions, and then unique interactions, and then 50,000 on across our personal. And I know that doesn't necessarily resonate home with everyone in the room, but it was a big deal for us. But more importantly, we ended up having, I think the total after the fact was 60, but when we were drafting this up, one of them, things get canceled, hurricanes happen, whatnot. We were sitting at 55 or 56. And so we ended up meeting with 30 people that could very realistically change the trajectory of our tech ecosystem, the trajectory of the city, just by getting involved. Jordan and Carter will touch more on it, but I think that's what I would say ended up happening. We came back with an idea of how do the most established and establishing incubators go and then curate talent. And then also we got out and said, we are here from the city of Columbia. Let's work together and let's learn together.
Yeah, a lot of it was to sort of figure out where all the resources were placed and see how they can sort of fit into the current ecosystem here in terms of cross-border partnerships as well.
yeah, we can have just some more stats real fast, and then we'll move on to recommendations and go over all the examples.
Yeah. KDM stats?
Yeah, even just where we went.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we started up, we took a little bit of a hopscotch a little bit around. So we started in Atlanta, but we went to Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And let me see here, Ryan, where are we here?
Yeah, he's looking for page 10. We ended up meeting with people across a bunch of different industries, and you can go in and see here. I went in and thought this was a fun graphic, broke it out for everyone, breaking it up by industry, and then job type. And so the majority of the people that we talked with and were able to go and then interact with were specifically either in academic institutions or in the real movers and shapers of capital in the Southeast. And so I think that was really the biggest takeaway. And if I had to go and then peg a value add, it would be that, because we were able to really talk to some cool people and then come back with knowledge that I don't think we would have had otherwise.
Yeah, so we can jump.
So can I ask quick, while we're on that
Yeah.
thought, okay, so Columbia does not have a lot of institutional capital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it doesn't have a lot of people that are tied to institutional capital. So you go to other places, they have this capital infrastructure, otherwise known as experience and expertise.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that institutional expertise when it comes to money?
Yeah.
And how to deploy it, how to grow it, how to leverage it, all of those things over and over and over.
I think we all have thoughts on that, but I think Jordan's best position to answer it.
Thanks, Jordan. If he misses anything, it's so helpful.
I got you.
Yeah, here we go, tag
You
in.
stay over there.
One of the points before I'll let Jordan roll is, I think on the top of what you just said is, there may not be a lot of institutional investors right here in Columbia. There are some. But one of the big points is you can attract outside capital. No, capital is not agnostic to a single location. In fact, the best and biggest investors invest across the entire globe. So you can have a very large system of reach and attract capital from wherever it is into a location, into an idea. And that's what we'll sort of jump in more as we go through the rest of the report as well.
You can,
Yeah.
but a lot of times capital is also risk averse. So people tend to, it's kind of like we're talking about South Carolina. So, and you said, well, a lot of people go to work on Wall Street. Well, Wall Street has a very, very tight model when it comes to how to do things. So, and there's a reason that they have this tight model, because it works. Okay, so all I'm saying is I'm continually thinking about how do we leverage the things that we have in Columbia, but then leverage them to that skill set that doesn't really exist in Columbia. So are you basically saying you had to bring that skill set here?
So, just to touch on our own experience, and then I'll move into the broader point. So we're raising a $100 million fund right now.
Okay.
About halfway there. If you were to guess how many dollars were from investors in Columbia, what would you peg it to? Given the last 4 years, we built this entire business here.
1%.
1%? Sure. Anyone else?
4.
4. Cool. Come on, Jeff, I know you want to say something.
5. This is the Price is Right, Jeff.
Safe guess.
Well, the reality is it's $0.
Okay. I was trying to be,
Sure,
positive
yeah.
with 1.
So that isn't to discredit Columbia in any way. It's to say that it can be done. It's less of the fact that there isn't capital that's willing to invest in the best opportunities, but to say that those opportunities aren't known about. And it was really hard for us to get our name and our brand out there. And so one of the big takeaways from this, which we'll get into, is really about ecosystem. So what we found in a lot of other cities, and part of it is what you were saying, is that capital arm of the ecosystem is there. But they're really fluid in, a lot of these institutions are really fluid in working and connecting together to promote the opportunities that are being created
A lot
already.
of this investment model is incestuous. It goes
Absolutely.
from one group to another. They just keep passing it up and down the
Once you're
line.
in the chain, then everyone knows about you.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Exactly. And a lot of that, what we found, starts with incubators, especially in Atlanta. There's plenty of scholar-like programs like the one that we have, but targeted towards entrepreneurship, where they take guys from a lot of different disciplines, even if the ideas are bad, but they just want to bring really smart people into the same area, the same building every single day, talking business, engineering, operations. And they say, hey, you guys have similar-ish ideas, and we're gonna
That's a good idea.
and we're gonna put you on a team, and for the next 2 years or the next year, however long the cohort is, you guys are gonna go work on solving a problem. And if you do that enough times while also attaching mentorship to on top of that, while attaching capital, like you're saying, and it doesn't take a lot to get a company going if it's a good idea. It really doesn't. You can do it through grant money. There's plenty of ways to do non-dilutive and dilutive capital. But if you attach mentorship, a little bit of money, and really give those guys time to succeed and help them get through the things that we found to take months to help them take, days or weeks with a little bit of help, then I think what you'll find is there's going to be a lot more success with those companies. And then it's what you're saying. Then you attach the marketing arm to that and the branding of whatever that is that's already working. And then it's like, hey, now you have a company that has a great idea. They have a little bit of revenue. What's the next step? Series A or venture capital or Series A, Series B, whatever it is. And then it becomes a big thing. And then you have 1 out of 100 of those companies becomes an IPO or unicorn, and then they invest back in the ecosystem, and then you have this cycle. But that takes 10 or 20 years, and the point Columbia is at right now is it has this really great university, so the pipeline of talent is already here. And I know it because of us, but we saw it every single day in our niche programs where guys were like, man, I have such a great idea for this thing. I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to go to Wall Street. I don't want to do 80, 90 hours a week, slaving away to 3 a.m., working for someone else, making them money. Exactly. I want to build my own company. And they have these great ideas. And then I go over to the engineering school. I'm finance and a computer science major, or I graduated with both. So I spent time in both schools. I go to the other school, and you have all these guys who are like, I'm hungry to build. I want to build something big, and I want to do it here. I'm from the area. I want to stay in the Southeast near my family. And those guys never talk. So one of our big things is how do we take those two people and put them in the same room and then give them all the resources they need to go and succeed? And so one of the big takeaways we have is if we could create some sort of cohort program ourselves that takes people that are sophomores that have already sort of shown interest in entrepreneurship, but even more than that, have just shown a little bit of ambition and success either in high school or they're in the honors college, whatever it is, some sort of filter to say, hey, you're obviously very smart and ambitious and you want to do something big. How do we take the people from the math department, the stat department, computer science, computer engineering, and business and put them all in the same room and give them a capstone-like problem from sophomore year to senior year where they're trying to create a company. And then to say, hey, when you graduate, these are the resources that are available to you. This is why you should stay. Here's the mentorship you got along the way. But because now you're so ingrained in the Columbia ecosystem, you can't leave. You can't. All of your mentorship's here. All of your capital is here. Your ecosystem for your new hires are coming from the university. There would be no reason to leave. And so,
Did you guys go to Athens, by the way?
Georgia?
Yeah, I was just curious.
No,
I
we
don't
went,
think so.
we were in Georgia, we were in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, I can assure you that Athens is tapping into Atlanta for all the
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah.
No,
So-
they
We
have,
spent some time at Georgia Tech, but not at UGA.
Yeah, well, Georgia Tech's got a good, I'm sure.
Oh,
The reason I was saying that was I'm actually on the board of I guess technically I still am, the entrepreneur program in Georgia. It's really,
Very cool.
it's similar to what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's just building a culture.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
And it's not, it is designed around a culture.
Yeah.
Not designed around like instantaneous riches. It's designed around an entrepreneurial culture that's also can be lived within a bigger organization. So you don't, even if you go to work for Coca-Cola, you can have an entrepreneurial spirit within a bigger company, although it's probably harder now than it used to be. But anyway, so it's a culture. So you're saying you're building a culture here.
Yeah, and it's not that it doesn't already exist, it just exists in
Without framework.
fragmented
Yeah.
pockets and without a framework. So how do we just take all of Columbia's fragmented pieces and put them together is mainly what we aim to figure out as the next step. And other cities have figured that out within their own innovation niche. I think one of the things that's really important is you gotta pick somewhere to start. Like you can't just do this for something really broad. Like if you're just like, I'm gonna go and create a whole bunch of really great entrepreneurs, like it might work, it definitely could. You could have some successful people out of that and there's nothing wrong with getting going with that. But we found a lot of cities that had those unicorn type companies that then started reinvesting back in the ecosystem. It was that they had decided that, hey, we're gonna go focus on health technology, or even Nashville with entertainment. Like obviously, Columbia doesn't want to be the red solo cup capital of the world, I think is what I heard it as. But Nashville decided to lean into that as their thing, and it's working for them. And now you have huge institutions that all focus on entertainment and bring the best new artists to that area, and it works. Not saying Columbia should do that, but just by kind of focusing in a little bit, I think that would help. It would go a long way if all the messaging came together. Yeah, points, guys.
So, do you have an idea for like what clusters you think would work here?
So one of the big things that we were doing, and we were promoting Columbia about on the roadshow and learning about, was SC Quantum. So obviously AI, machine learning, you got a ton of data. How can we handle it, make better decisions for the future, make better inventions for the future? How do we make everybody's lives better because we have a ton of data, ton of speed now, right? So Quantum's the next layer of that. So NVIDIA's perspective 20 years ago was, hey, AI is going to be a thing, right? We're going to invest in it now. Our stock's going to drip by, and then one day we're going to be the leader. So that's sort of the perspective that SC Quantum's taking on. SC Quantum is taking on Quantum right now. So Quantum has the ability to exponentially speed up our ability to do everything. And it really feels like it's going to be the next frontier of technology. So a potential thing you could dive into, and the thing about diving into this one is you allow it to layer on to other businesses and industry verticals because it's about speed, and speed's needed everywhere. But SC Quantum has done a really, really good job so far at developing cross-border relationships, the ability to take a group of companies, academics, and put them together with government leaders as well to go out and potentially be able to raise outside capital because it's a big name. We just spoke with Joe Queenan over at SC Quantum very recently, and some of the stuff we had put in here was sort of saying that other places are doing a good job, but really what we found is places that have invested billions of dollars, like Chicago, hundreds of millions of dollars, like
Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. I mean, $100 million investment from Singapore. Some of these groups that are investing the most amount of money in quantum are calling people in Columbia, South Carolina right now for advice on how to partner, how to build an ecosystem for this new technology. So it's not saying we're 100% on that idea, but it feels like it's working right now, and it's here.
All right, so my question when it comes to the quantum computing, so you're basically, what I'm trying to figure out is that a institution on its own, or is it something that would broaden out and help grow this entrepreneurial campus we want to?
Yeah.
We can do two things. I think one, this concept of a cohort program, if you're working in tangent with the university, which I feel like at this point is kind of the message you're getting across, is all of the institutions you have to work together. They can't be fragmented anymore. They have to focus in on a group of really highly talented individuals and pump resources into them and then continue to do that, and over a 5-10 year period is when you get the culture that you're looking for. But past that, if in terms of branding on an innovation niche, what I think Carter was getting at is we found that a lot of cities, and you mentioned it with NVIDIA, but a lot of cities, when deciding what to do, we talked with a few guys over at Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they hired McKinsey and spent a whole bunch of money trying to figure out the same problem. Like,
You can't hire the man to tell you how to beat the man. That makes no sense.
very fair, yeah. They'll tell you what you want to hear, and you'll pay them a whole bunch of money to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, you're good, you're
Good
good.
point.
But what they told them to focus on was legacy businesses. So take things that were working, that just had opportunity to be optimized with technology and focus on that. Now, I can't sit here and tell you I know what that is for Columbia, but what I can say is for all of those cases, with Tulsa and especially the Research Triangle area, they all looked at things that were going to be successful 10 years from now. They didn't go, hey, look, this is already being optimized. The digitization of whatever it is, it could even be just cybersecurity, that already happened, which means you can't invest in that or you're always going to be behind. You'll never be a leader. But what you want to do is look at something that's going to be super, super impactful in 5 or 10 years and say, hey, by the time we've built this really amazing culture and invested in this niche, then that's when you get the real payoff of being a true leader.
So does that mean we're too late to be part of the EV period?
I would say too late. I think the automotive has been industry has been pretty successful in South Carolina actually.
That's what everybody's sold on, is that you have this.
500 companies
Yeah,
across this.
yeah, you have this,
Yeah.
you have, and then you develop this corridor of innovation, we'll call it. So,
How's the crossover of that with SC Nexus, Quantum,
Sure.
cyber, all of that? There has to be a way to tie those three major, what we see as the growth points together to get
which ties
push
also
that to
in,
that emerging
yeah,
thing.
which also ties into the skill set, you know, I mean, not that, I don't want to say this the wrong way because it sounds like an indictment. There is a certain skill set in South Carolina that you have to recognize that 5.6 million people have in general. So you gotta kind of work with what you got at some point. So that does tie into, you know, we do have a manufacturing base, you know, we do have, you know, people that can do stuff. We've just never had the leadership to implement something this dramatic as a program. So, and I think what you find out is that's why, how many headquarters do we have here, Daniel?
I don't know.
Okay, so what happens is you end up void of a sustainable model. So if somebody does something, they get bought. Somebody does something, they get bought. Somebody does something, yeah, and
That's
you.
been the trend.
Yeah, right, so that's been us, South Carolina, for a long time. I mean, you have to, this has to be part of, you can't just steal people to come here. You can create this culture that hopefully people do come here as part of it, but you work with the human infrastructure that you already have and the stuff around it, which is our universities and you know, who they are. So I think this is, you know, I think we would agree that this is.
They need an innovation pad.
Yeah,
I mean, when I'm listening to all this, you know, you put a landing pad to allow different businesses to start somewhere as a way to start. What y'all are really talking about is creating an innovative pad, innovation pad. It really allows people to bring all those resources, make those connections and create a team sport out of it.
Well, that's what the place in Athens is, I think they actually call it a launching pad.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a
Like a
creative.
meeting space,
It
like a
is,
creative space.
it's just, and they've got,
They're
granted,
drawing those different disciplines, and I think that's what hasn't ever happened here. I mean, we've been through the small container reactors, we've been to the insurance tech, we've done all this, but the problem is they've never intersected the multiple disciplines that it takes to really launch. And I think that's what is always, to me, very interesting about what y'all did. I mean, y'all have crossed over across, you know, most people stay in their little 4-block area. You know, I'm in the business school and I stay in those 4 blocks. I'm in the engineering school, I stay there. But what y'all are showing is how do we take that, intertwine that with the existing talent and opportunities that are here from a mentor, that brings the capital to the table.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, that's what gets people excited. And it gives us that innovation jump, you know, and that's where, as we're talking about remarketing the incubator and stuff, creating an umbrella thing that we can use to market, you know. USC Columbia Incubator doesn't make people fly here and say, I wanna go see what those guys are doing. But an innovative name that talks about the crossover and the tying in. We got 6 colleges and universities. You know, having a place where you have a model, where you can build your model, where you've got, you will walk down the hall and collaborate with another group who may be crossing that line. I mean, the one thing we have is space and opportunities, and we have talent here. We just gotta bring them to the table.
Yeah, exactly. I think you guys have it already. Boyd is a fantastic place. The Boyd Innovation Center, they've been super great to us. The main problem is, if there was one, is when we go in there, it's relatively empty. It's not that the whole build it and they will come thing works if they know about it, but I don't think a lot of people know about it, for one. And two, the way that you know, it's fun when you listen to tricks about people trying to get their restaurants filled, the whole point is put a bunch of fake customers outside of the door and make it look like it's more popular than it really is, then everyone comes. the idea with the cohort program is kind of a little bit to do the same. Let's fill up the space and really bring the energy and engagement up a whole bunch, and then let that sort of pull other people into
tell the
the
story.
area.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we struggled with as a city for a long time, and we're getting over that hump. That's why you see the investments that are happening, you see the vibe that's going on, and why people are excited about it. Because we're telling the story, we're finally telling that story. We gotta do the same thing there with that innovation, is that there's a story to be told. And part of why we wanted you to go on the road is to let people know what can actually happen.
It also gives like a very focused group of people for everybody else who's like absolutely necessary to make that cohort successful, like a stomping ground to work together. Let's say, hey, the engineering dean and the business dean, this is a great chance for you guys to come together working with students here.
All right, so I was gonna tap it into what I was.
Yeah.
So, and I don't wanna keep talking about Georgia, but
Right.
it's what I know and.
They did
um,
beat Texas.
That's true. But what they did was they started to build a very loose structure around the concept. All right, so let that sink in. A loose structure around the concept. Well, that sounds like nothing, but that's not true. It was something. But it wasn't, if you get too structured, then people don't want to do it. Okay, so you can't have creativity with too much structure, but you gotta have some structure, otherwise you end up with nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there has to be a loose structure around the vibe or the culture or whatever you wanna call it, but there has to be some structure. And it's gotta, otherwise people won't get it.
Absolutely.
And believe it or not, people do like structure, they just don't like being managed. That's the difference, okay? If I wanna be managed, I'll go to work for, Boeing. But if I wanna be, free, I'll go work for Scout. So you gotta have this pretty loose, but structural loose concept.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we can help with that, to be honest with you.
I think part of it too is you have the university, which can be your structure if you had to have one, right? Like one part of this cohort program is you gotta, develop these students. They're coming in as ambitious, but we can't waste their brains. So a big part of that is development. And so that's why I think it's super important to run the engineering kids and the business students too through entrepreneurship classes. Like this cohort shouldn't be just a thing where they have a big capstone project where they work on the side. They should be getting course credit and taking courses with all the different minded people in the same classroom.
But you gotta
So-
tap them their freshman year, you can't wait.
You gotta
till
tap them,
sophomore
it's gotta be,
year.
it's gotta be.
Yeah.
They even have an entrepreneurial dorm. I mean, it's, and again, I think you're right, and I've heard different stuff from different people. A lot of people think that the university is stifling and well, the problem is that's who we got. Okay, so that's our structure, and you can make the universities here, they have to be a part of it, but they don't have to, you don't want them to own it. You just want them to you wanna rent them. So you want to use them for their own benefit. I think you have to tap into that structure, and then you're the vibe, they're the structure, and so but you can't let them take over, otherwise it won't
We
work.
don't take over. I think it's a couple of things. One, I'll say, the universities here are actually pretty fantastic. And I know that having done 4 years of doing something completely impossible with these guys, and we figured it out. And that was because a couple professors took a shot on us when we were sophomores, and we came up with an idea, and we said, hey, we're gonna do something crazy that no one's ever done before, not just in this city, but since Citadel was founded and became the largest hedge fund in the world. And they said, that's crazy, probably should go get a job on Wall Street, but we'll hear you out. And they connected us around with the people we needed to talk to. And so I do think there's a,
You're making my point. The answer is without them, you
Right.
gotta have something, right?
Mhm.
Without that, whatever that minimal structure was, you have to have it.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to. Otherwise, you got nothing. You don't know which way to go or what to do.
Absolutely.
So,
And you leave a structure around it where, when you have a question about how to build your product, you go to the engineering people that have background in that, right?
Right.
You have a problem about how to put together.
And everybody's got
Exactly.
everybody's got a purpose. I mean, people
Exactly.
always ask us, why we never went private equity, and my answer's always been, you don't go to private equity unless they can accelerate your ability to do something that you can't do on your own. That's what they're there for. They're there to take you from here to here as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to it. So if you're okay doing this, then you can do it on your own. But if you lose out because you're doing this, because somebody else is doing this, well, that's no good, right? So I do think there's an important piece of this, which is the capital part of this. That's super important to take good ideas
Yeah.
to the next level.
So there's two more big points on top of what you just said. The second one will be capital, but one is also going back to your point about structure. Like, who's actually going to oversee this? Is it going to be the university? Is it Boyd? Is it city council? Whatever. Who's it going to be?
Promise you it's not us.
You want to do it?
Promise you it's not us.
We're gonna be a limited part of the structure, which is what we wanna do. We wanna provide some movable structure around it, but
Yeah.
that's a very good question.
I mean, I just feel like in general, there's a lot of baggage, which is why people aren't working together because they're just used to it being that way. And I, as a graduate of the university as well, I think they're rich in resources, but there's also, it's very different when you're dealing with professors invested in students versus the institution as a whole. You can have a
Yeah.
very inconsistent experience, right? So to me, you have to identify a neutral convener that's going to actually be able to rebuild some relationships that need to be rebuilt. I think one of the biggest issues with the Boyd Innovation Center is that they are very siloed, and that happens to a lot of communities here because they're smaller, whether it's the arts community or the innovation community, they just kind of stick to themselves. And I think very unintentionally, it becomes almost as if like other people don't know about it and it feels very exclusive. So to me, one of the constant themes I'm seeing in this is that we need an organization or a group that this becomes kind of their sole purpose is just to focus on building that innovation hub or that innovation approach that, doesn't have to deal with kind of some of the history that has kept a lot of this collaboration from happening. And sure, the university should be the right group that's going to be building a pipeline. And I will mention, we had some investment from Google and some other larger companies in Benedict to build some cohorts, and they did a cohort style to get them into tech careers. And it's been pretty successful. They've had, I think, one cohort already graduate. So there are things like that, but you probably didn't know about that, right?
No.
So we have some great relationships in Silicon Valley as well. It's just, we need that like neutral entity that's going to say like, we're doing this. And there's no, I'm getting something out of this except for my pure, desire to see Columbia really be put on the map. So that's what I think the missing piece is here. And I agree with a lot of your recommendations.
I think we have a skeleton that gives us the playbook to start this. We just need to sit down really and collaborate on figuring out where those one or two missing pieces that allow us to do that. And I think with some of the things that we've been working on that you're not privy of yet, but that are coming together in the collaboration are going to give us the basis for that hub. So the question really becomes behind that too, all right, how do we fill those other gaps? And how do we go ahead and start tapping those sources, especially at the university early? Getting those folks who have that drive in the earlier and getting them involved in the ecosystem in the beginning where they feel like it's family and it's not just a business.
No, absolutely. I think one of the ways we thought about it, and again, this is a conversation, so it's just an idea, was creating some form of a formalized board that has members of all the different institutions that are pumping resources into these students, or entrepreneurship cohort, whatever it is. And I think if we brought the same way we're bringing a bunch of different disciplines into this to learn from each other, we should bring a bunch of different people with different perspectives that have to come into it with a super open mind about how the structure of this should work. And it has to be something that's never been done before, and we gotta get rid of, like you said, all the baggage. I think that's super important.
Gotta leave it at the door.
Yeah, gotta leave it at the door. And then to answer your point earlier, on top of all of this, assuming you get all that going, in terms of capital, there's a couple of large institutions that haven't invested yet, to my knowledge, into the city, into students. And one is the pension, is one of the most successfully run pensions recently that I've seen. I'm sure you could speak more about it since you study these things. But the second one,
Exhilarating, studying pensions.
It's actually pretty fascinating.
He's really cool.
He's cool.
He's really cool.
And then the second one is the university itself. So one of the things that we're doing soon is we're going to be speaking to the Business Partnership Foundation. So the people that are involved with overseeing how the business school is run and are in the investment committee for the whole institution as a whole. And so we're going to talk about a lot of what next steps could look like to create more of this.
Don't forget about the foundation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The third piece.
Absolutely. So
Partnership Foundation.
if you create a little bit of structure though, my point is, then now you've created an opportunity that might be a legitimate investment for them. Something a little bit more focused than these one-off venture capital style investments like, oh, hey, there's a student group with a cool company, maybe we'll take part of our $30 billion and invest in them. Instead, it should be, hey, we have this cohort and you have a continual investment for the ones that either stay in Columbia or even just the ones that are successful.
Is that part of your scope of your road trip, those continued conversations?
Do you mean like, do we have these
Is
conversations during the
No, is that
show?
part of what was in your proposal that we signed up for?
To have,
For you to go talk to the business school, go talk to everybody else that's
Oh,
doing
no.
stuff around here to figure out.
no, not
no.
yet. No, this was mainly to learn about what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And what we found is the most successful things we were a part of are just done at scale in other cities.
So
So
you
like,
found what other people are doing in the city?
so for us, what I mean by that is the Carolina Finance Scholars Program was incredibly successful for us, but targeted towards investment banking. And then which these other cities, especially Atlanta, they're applying that same cohort style system, but to a much broader group of people and over the course of building a culture to a broader group of entrepreneurship and innovation niches. So we're just saying if we could take some of what they've already built, which took 10 or 20 years to do, and kind of start that progress here in Columbia, I think that would
These
be
ideas are
the next
stolen.
step.
It's true.
Yeah.
I do think though, I mean, so let's go back to the board real quick. I think that adds the structure. I think what I would recommend is that we have a public-private type board that provides some looseness to the structure. So, yeah, and again, hate saying the G word again, but what they did was they just had super support from the president of the university on down and then set up a private board to run it. The problem with the all private board is it tends to be not very structured. So, you have a board meeting with 25 people and 8 of them show up. Well, that's no good, and then so what you end up with is too much vibe and not enough real. So I think that would be my recommendation is to come up with a public-private type situation that makes sense. But actually what you're talking about with the business school makes a lot of sense. I mean, they set up the lowest common denominator that would work. So it seems like they can now grow into this different, we cannot, South Carolina will never compete on the open stage with other places that are way far ahead of us unless we grow our own companies. We just can't. I mean, who's moving here? I mean, it's just not, even the concept that, yeah, I know, you're right, but I'm just saying though, but there was a reason, but there's a reason. Give me one more, give me something that's not in transportation. Yeah, well, Dell's not coming here, is what I'm
But
saying.
we got a lot of
So-
investment from Google and other, but yeah, I get your point.
But why?
But I think for us is part of what we wanna see is to grow those headquarters here. And those companies stay here, and Peter's right, I mean, the majority of these businesses that started here sold out early and they just got gobbled up. And we want to build up that because that gives us a longer standing.
We want people that are invested in the community and invested, and we want to invest in them, so that's the part of the thing that we want to do is build this mutual investment in each other. So,
I have thoughts on this. One of the most impactful things that we saw was the Atlanta Tech Village. The idea being, Atlanta started out, it was a transportation hub, all the trains were flowing there, and then that so happened to go and then create a lot of businesses there as well. And so Atlanta, 20 years ago, went and looked at it, at their entrepreneurship scene, and they said, let's go and focus on financial technology. The internet was emerging. It was a prime time to go and then invest. What they did is they created a cohort program, like we mentioned, that goes and flows through the same space, scales up, and then as soon as, and I bring this up because it is a very real thing to go ahead and be gobbled up per se, once you hit a point of critical scale where you're a valid acquisition target. As soon as they hit that point of scale, Atlanta comes in again, and then they go and then consult to go and then grow. So they have both a nursery for startups and then also an established network of not only successful founders, but large industry partners to go and then exclusively go and grow these companies into something that's not just an acquisition target, but it's a viable business. And I think I bring it up because I think that's the piece of the puzzle that's missing, because
who was the driver of that?
it was a private investment from a man named Dave Cummings. What ends up happening though, his investment goes and kickstarts everything, which usually when there's an opportunity set, private capital doesn't hurt. That's what started it. Since then, it's evolved, and what I mean by that is now there's a lot more public involvement to a certain degree, and now it's the ATV, Atlanta Tech Village, is viewed as an infrastructure project as well.
Is Georgia Tech involved in that or not?
I think it really is an umbrella. It's not like one.
Okay, I like
place,
that term. I think that's a really good term, umbrella. And I think that goes back to the concept of the structure. What you want from the universities is that umbrella of support.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
It's the idea of, it's not yours, it's not mine, it's ours.
Yeah, I like that. I like that term umbrella. I think that helps people kind of understand what they're there for and what they're not there for. We don't want them to own it. We want them to participate in it. So what do we do next?
Well, we had a couple of things. One is what you're saying is you guys already have sort of the skeleton. It's but how do you actually take it from skeleton to building the rest of the mold? I think it makes a lot of sense, like you said, to do a public-private partnership. And unfortunately, the next step is just more conversations. I think part of that is internal, where it's, going to getting the key decision makers of this city that are going to be a part of something like this and get in the same room saying, hey, we need to do this. Like, this is something we have to do. Let's actually make an effort to do it. And then bring in, and I think the talent already exists here, but having a couple of guys on the private side that are willing to come in and say, hey, I want to help lead this thing and be a part of it. And that can be through the form of a board or however you guys deem it. But I think that would be kind of the next step. And then two, in terms of external, there's a few cities that we didn't visit that are already really successful and are worth looking at in greater detail. We put a few in here just so you could look at it. And it's funny that a lot of these are now, we put them in here to go and learn from. But they're actually, is what Carter was saying, they're actually reaching out to learn from us, but specifically in quantum.
Yeah.
But Boulder, Colorado is growing insanely fast. They just raised $1 billion to go and do quantum computing. Not Denver, Boulder. And they have
Because all
several,
the people left California.
they did have a huge wave, but it was primarily due to one or two people that
Who the one guy is.
were able to raise a ton of money.
Worth about 2 to 3 billion, so.
Yeah, it only takes a couple of people, a little bit of money to believe in a vision.
Jamie Harper is in well. He did in route.
Yeah, so that's one, Boulder. The other one was Tulsa, Oklahoma. We met with them and we did it virtually because we couldn't actually get out there. but they actually invited you and others to come and see how their innovation lab is working like firsthand. It's incredibly successful. They have a Tulsa Remote program where they pretty much offer a $10,000 stipend for any technical remote workers to come and live in their city and for a year. And then what they found is, I don't know what the hit rate was, but it was like
It was
90 something.
It was high, yeah.
Yeah, to stay. And then we met also with the guy who's the head of their innovation laboratory. And it sounded like, and then all of this is through the George Kaiser Family Foundation. So they had one pool of capital and they just managed it really well to build all of this. But they had a lot of success building a lot of startups in their community.
I think the talent part of this is a really important thread that traditionally we've shipped all our talent out.
Yeah.
And that's your sign of success if you leave, not if you stay. So we gotta change that mentality. And I think we can do it, but we gotta, I mean, I feel a little bit like, we could be the city could be a good coordinator of the convener of pieces. I mean, there's pieces that have to come into place and again, traditionally, nobody wants to do that. And I'm not sure why, but it's been, I've been sitting in this place for a long time and nobody wants to step up. So I think we can serve that role, so maybe we
We're in a
could,
different place.
yeah.
People want to collaborate today, and that was negative that we had for a long time.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think we can help with this, our role can be that, to help bring the right people together versus the wrong people. All right, so more to come?
Yeah, I think we just need to have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, we're happy.
Follow-up, and then, let's explore Tulsa and,
I really do want you guys to go to
reach out
Athens.
to those guys.
That's completely fair. Yeah, I'd love to see what's working.
I'll introduce you to the guy who runs the program. His name is Bob Pinckney. He came out of the private sector. He's super
Sounds familiar.
Yeah,
solid
that sounds
guy.
very familiar.
I think he's done an amazing job. And pretty quietly, you know, I mean, a lot of this stuff doesn't need fireworks and, engines going off and sirens. It's just having the right structure that's not too structured to build off of.
Just start the compounding process. Let it begin.
One more question. How important is the space? The actual physical space of that we need? How important is that?
It's about the people in it.
It's way more about the
Okay.
people inside of it and the people around it and the people that want it to work.
Attracted.
Yeah.
It's like that bottled water store.
Yeah. I would say once,
Bottled water at the convenience store for $1, but you take it to the airport and put it in a nice case, it's $7.
yeah,
How much would 1835 sell for?
Oh my God. Thank y'all very much. We
Absolutely.
appreciate the updates.
Yeah, no, I like this a lot. So somebody email me and I'll hook you up with the guy at Georgia.
Awesome.
And I think you should meet, I'm sure I can hook you up. You should meet the president of Georgia too. He's, I'll see if I can hook you guys up. I think it's important to understand from the leadership role of the university, how important that is for this.
Well, cool. Well, let us know what we can do, guys.
and we want to see this place succeed as much as it's the next guy. So.
Yeah, great.
Well, we want you all to raise another 250 million so you can put in 50 million into the project.
We're gonna go try
got a
that.
deal.
Yeah, seriously, yeah. We raised 250, you got a deal.
Yeah, sometime over alcohol, I'll tell you when I was chairman of the Geology and Economic Development Authority, the state borrowed $50 million to invest in South Carolina companies, and it was a nightmare.
We can do better than nightmare.
Yeah, we can beat Nightmare, we'll say that.
Worse. And, it was. The only thing I was smart enough to do was to require $50 million of tax credits to offset potential losses.
There you go.
Thanks, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for supporting us as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Will do. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Can we do executive? Do we need to go into executive session?
Yeah, it'll be quick.
Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Do we go into executive session?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the discussion of matters relating to the proposed location, expansion, or provision of services, encouraging location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by public body pursuant to SC Code 30-4-785, 2725 Main Street.
Second. I think that should be, yep, we will.